Well, hello again, my friends, and welcome once more to the Invisible College. And we've got quite a special lecture for you today. I think it would be true to say that this is going to be the most esoteric lecture I've yet done. It's very direct, and it's in a way I'm putting all the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together. But of course, in doing that, I have to leave out a lot of the detail that I've discussed in other lectures. And there will be other lectures to come yet, which will go into more detail in certain aspects. But I want you to get a larger view, as it were. And you're going to find it quite shocking, a lot of you. And I think you're going to think, is this guy crazy? Where's he coming from? You know, I've been with him up to now, but he's gone too far now. He's really gone too far. Well, I understand that. I understand why you might think that. And all I can say in my defense is I have been involved in this for a very long time, and I've done an awful lot of research and work into areas and fields and places that you've never even heard of, most likely. I don't claim to be a Superman or a genius or, I don't know, a great guru or anything like that. I'm just a man like you are, or the men of you are. I'm just an ordinary human. But I have asked the questions and I've demanded the answers, and a lot of things have been shown to me. And I'm going to share with you a sort of overall map, as it were, to get a grip on where this thing is coming from and where it's going. And you're going to be quite shocked when you hear sort of really what this Western way is all about. So without any more ado, this one's called The Truth About the Western Way. And you're probably thinking, what's he mean, Western way? Well, that's opposed to the Eastern way, but you'll see that as we go along. Now, most people, if they think of spiritual development at all, they associate it with the East, especially India. Since the young Beatles first visited the Maharishi in the 1960s, there's been an explosion in the West of all forms of Eastern mysticism. And don't they just look young there? Look at that Paul McCartney on the far left. Well. Today, classes teaching Hatha Yoga and various kinds of meditation are available in every town of any size, certainly here in Britain, and I think it's the same in America and many other countries. Riding on the back of this boom, Buddhism has become the fastest growing religion in Europe. While Christian churches of nearly all denominations have been emptied, there's been a ready market for teachers from even the most obscure Eastern cults to make a living in the West. So you're more likely to find your friends who are saying, well, actually, I'm a Buddhist, or, I'm following this kind of Vedanta, or I've taken up Zen, or I'm learning martial arts, because that's kind of a specialized Eastern method of meditation. You're more likely to hear that than them to say, well, actually, I've become a Christian. I go to church every week. There's been a marked shift. Now, in the New Age, anything goes except for Christianity. It's regarded as dull, patriarchal, irrational, anti-scientific, outdated, and generally uncool. But is this truly a fair assessment? After all, Few Westerners who take up yoga or meditation want to become full-blown Hindus or Buddhists. They don't suddenly start believing in elephant-headed gods, goddesses with 6 arms, or wish to bathe in the Ganges in the company of floating dead bodies. I mean, that's kind of what happens in India, you know. It's a very holy river, the Ganges, and the fact that it's got dead bodies floating down it, because that's where people want to be put after death. Well, it's supposed to not matter. It's not going to be full of all sorts of bacteria. I beg to differ. What they're looking for are ways of self-development that make use of Eastern techniques, but without having to believe in the doctrines of Eastern religions. This is a contradiction. So people go out east looking to find techniques, mainly. Techniques for meditation, techniques for breathing, techniques for doing yoga, getting powers, siddhis they call them in India, clairvoyance, healing abilities, all these kind of powers. That's what people thirst for. They want to feel they're special, you know. It doesn't usually end up that way. They can end up very confused. But I've talked about that in other lectures, so I won't go into that. Now, back in 1970, I was at the beginning of what would turn out to be a lifelong journey. And don't I look different there, age 20? Yeah, I had hair in those days, believe it or not. Like so many of the post-war generation, I was desperate to find meaning. I took up yoga and planned to go to India to find a guru. Yeah, I was going to follow the trail beaten by the Beatles. I got as far as Israel, but was persuaded there that going further east would likely be futile as well as spiritually dangerous. Instead, I came back home to England and began a serious investigation into our own Western forms of spirituality and self-development. My journey has taken me to many countries. I've also read literally thousands of books and had the great good fortune to meet older people than myself who, though now deceased, passed on what they knew. And there I am. This is actually in Turkey, a place called Kamarjin, and that's the Lion of Kamarjin. It's actually a horoscope. Amazing place, worth visiting, but I wouldn't go there at the moment. ISIS, or what remains of it, is a bit too close for comfort. I have also had some very strange esoteric experiences, such as dreams, telepathy, and even going out of body to the stars. Yeah, well, that's another story, but we'll talk about that another time, maybe. What this has taught me is that we of the West do not need to go to India, China, or anywhere else to find our way to God. The Western way is open to us already. It does not require a cultural change. In other words, we have a way of our own, a way of esoteric Christianity, the way of the West, as I call it. The greatest teachings of all time lie within the Christian mystical tradition itself. Our problem is that our priests are generally ignorant. They can't teach what they don't know, and so rely on blind faith. And this is not enough. It's certainly not enough for me. I'm sorry if you are a devout Christian, maybe a Catholic, Anglican, and you like going to church, and that's great. You like the singing, you like the incense, you like the men dressed up in robes and the feeling of sanctity. That's great. If that is what floats your boat, fantastic. But I'm someone who has to know, and I have to find out the truth and dig deeper. That's just my nature, I'm afraid. I've always been like that. And it has produced certain results, and that's what this lecture is going to be all about and what I've found. So what is the Western tradition really about? Well, let us start by saying what it is not. Now, I'm sorry if I'm going to insult some of you here, but it has to be done. I'm sorry. I have to speak the truth. I have to speak what I know to be true. So let us start by saying what it is not. It is not magic, spelled with or without a K. The K, magic, I-C-K, is a reference to Aleister Crowley, who used to like to spell magic that way. And there's a lot of people today following the works of Aleister Crowley, who branded himself as the most evil man in the world. So why you would want to follow the most evil man in the world, I cannot understand, but yet people do. And it's a very quick way of getting yourself possessed by demons. So I would keep away from that if I were you. It is not neo-paganism, whether dressed up as a form of pseudo-druidism or as veneration of fields, stones, streams, ley lines, wells, stars, idols, or anything else. I have to tell you, as a Christian, if you're going to be following those things and worshipping those things and worshipping nature, and nature gods and dells and the rest of it, you're actually breaking the first commandment within the Bible. So it's not going to get you very far, I'm afraid, because again, you're going to be drawn into demonic worship and demonic possession. You might get some powers temporarily, but it's not going to get you to heaven. So I would again say keep clear of those things. I understand why you might be interested, because they do promise a lot. All those sparkly crystals and tinkly music and incense. Yes, wonderful, but it's not going to get you where you need to go. It's not Satanism, Luciferianism, theosophy. I put theosophy in here because Madame Blavatsky herself was a Luciferian. And she said that Lucifer was the true God that we should be following. So don't go down that path. I'm sorry to insult you if you're a theosophist. I've actually lectured at the Theosophical Society before. I didn't realise who she was and what her real core beliefs were at that time. I wouldn't do it again now. Be very, very careful of the occult. It's very dangerous. And it can seem simple, easy, nice people, nice chats. It can be extremely dangerous to your soul. So be very careful what you play with. Guru cults of personality. Yeah, I've met some of those. Yeah, more than I would like to, let's say. Communism. Yes, that is a demonic enterprise if ever there was one. Socialism. You might think, well, socialism, that's all right, isn't it? The NHS. Rights for workers and so on. Yeah, but that's not its agenda. Its agenda is actually communism in the end. It's the destruction of our society as it presently is and the substitution of another one, which turns out to be something more like Stalinism or what's happening in Russia today. Terrible. It's a rebirth of all the things we thought had gone away. We're finding that Russia today is behaving like Nazi Germany did in the last war, invading neighbouring territories, wanting to conquer them by force. Keep away from it all. Fascism, well, yes, anti-fascism. That's often fascism just dressed up and calling itself the opposite of what it really is. Feminism, yeah, why have an ism to do with your gender? Men and women are supposed to work together. We make a pair, we make a duality, and out of that duality we create the foundations of any true society, which is the family. A society that's not founded on families doesn't last. And people who don't find love and affection with the other gender to raise families are probably going to have, unless they're on a spiritual path, they're probably going to find themselves really quite unhappy, because the family is the basis of society. Wokeism, yes, wokeism, where you try to shut down all debate from other people, and you do reverse racism, calling white people racist, just because they're not black. I mean, it's shocking. It's a shocking twisting around. And I'm sorry if this insults you, but we have to call a spade a spade. Yeah, we have to identify that which is and what it is, and not be afraid to call it out, because that's the truth. We're all equal on this planet. Doesn't matter what race you are, what colour, mixed race, whatever. We're all in the same boat, and it's a boat that's sinking fast. And you need to find a way out. You need to find the truth. You need to get off this planet before too long, because it's going to be very difficult here. I can tell you that for certain. And you'll understand why as we progress. Or any other political movement that ends in ism. Don't bother with politics. It's a blind alley. Takes away people's lives and turns them into bigots. Don't bother with it. Try to live the good life. And if enough of us do that, the politics that emerges will be right politics. For the truth is simple. The way we need to follow is not really of this world. It does not come from the mind of man or demon, but from God himself. So the real truth, the real religion, is actually from God himself. Now, if you don't believe in God, you tell me who or what created this universe. You tell me that. There has to be an originating cause. Everything is created through mind and then into matter. That's the way things work. And if you're denying that, you're denying truth. If I had to put it in just a couple of words, I would say that the truth about the Western way is summed up in 2 words. Rescue mission. That's what the Western way is all about. It's a rescue mission. We need to understand that we live on a fallen world and in a damaged solar system. Not all solar systems and planets are like ours. Indeed, the vast majority are not. We do not understand this because we are unable to get off this world. It is a prison planet. You are living in a prison planet. And it's a bit like the movie, the film, The Matrix, where everybody's having this, living their lives out. They don't realize that their minds have been abstracted and being given a movie to play around in. They think that that's their life. Their real life, in the movie this is that they're just battery units driving mechanical civilization of machines. They've got all sorts of things. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. All sorts of things plugged into them to take electricity from their bodies, which just float in a bath of saline until they die. Then they're unplugged, that one's just flushed away, and another one's put in there. Got to realise that this world that we think is so wonderful, so great, is a prison planet, and we need to escape from it. But it's very difficult. We can't do it alone. We now know that there are more galaxies in this universe than there are grains of sand on all our beaches. Only a fool would consider that in all of this vast universe, Earth is the only place where there is intelligent life. I think even Stephen Hawking said that. There's got to be intelligent life elsewhere, because statistically, why would it only be on this Earth, this one insignificant planet going round a mediocre star? Why would that be? It wouldn't, would it? If life is something meaningful, and I think it is, then it's going to be everywhere, and we're going to find it in due course. But the problem is that we live in a damaged solar system, on a damaged planet. Now, what are clearly the remnants of a former planet of our solar system lie between Mars and Jupiter. You can see there, this scattering I've put there. We call this the asteroid belt. We can intuit that there should be another planet there, for there is a rule of planetary spacing known as Bode's law. That's his Bode-Titius rule. Titius was a guy who discovered it first, and Bode publicized it. The existing planets from Mercury to Neptune obey this rule, but there is a gap in the region of the asteroids. The planets in our solar system are not in just any old orbits. Instead, they obey a rule discovered by a German astrologer called Johann Titius in 1772. It was popularized by John Bode, an Anglican priest from England. The rule is therefore known as Bode-Titius rule. And the rule, and I'm not going to go into the exact equations here, we'll do that another time maybe, but I just want you to see the results at this time. The rule predicts a table of predicted distances of planets measured in astronomical units, that's AU, with the Earth's distance from the Sun as 1 astronomical unit. Now, so if you look here in this table here, and at the far right, see formula, and under that, it gives you, according to the rule, the distance the planet should be. It goes 0.4, 0.7, so that's Mercury and Venus, Earth 1, Mars 1.6, 2.8 is between Jupiter and Mars, 5.2 for Jupiter, 10 for Saturn, 19.6 for Uranus, and 38.8 for Neptune. And then we look at the actual there, and Mercury 0.387, very close to 0.4. Venus 0.723, very close to 0.7. Earth 1, well of course it is 1 because we're measuring on astronomical units. Mars 1.52, again very close to 1.6. Ceres, that's the largest moon. I think it was a moon. The largest of the asteroids is 2.8, and that's exactly bang on the formula. Jupiter 5.2, bang on. Saturn 9.55, very close to 10. Uranus 19.2, very close to 19.6. Neptune 30.1, well it's not that close I know, but we're a long way out by here, 38.8. It should be. So we got this whole system of planetary spacings, and it seems that Ceres, this one asteroid, fits very exactly into the slot where there should be another planet. But the asteroids themselves are mostly lumpy rocks. They look like a debris field following an explosion. A few asteroids are larger, notably Ceres. There's a picture of it. Though much smaller than our moon, it is roughly spherical in shape. It is also heavily cratered. It seems likely to me that it was once a moon of the now disappeared planet. Whatever great catastrophe caused the demise of the planet severely scarred Ceres. It's now clear from investigations by Rocket Rendezvous that comets are not dirty balls of ice. In actuality, they are rocky bodies, not dissimilar to asteroids. In fact, we can say that comets are simply asteroids with highly elliptical and long-period orbits. They too are debris, not from the formation of the solar system. That's nonsense that scientists keep saying, there's a bit left over after the planets formed and that formed the... But it doesn't work that way, and gravity will not pull them together for you, I'm sorry. Not from the formation of the solar system, but rather the demise of the missing planet. The argument that there is not enough of this material, either as asteroids or comets, to make up a planet doesn't hold water either. Much, perhaps most of the material has been swallowed up by Jupiter, the Sun, or the other planets. Yes, well, we saw that, I forget the name of it, the comet that was sucked into Jupiter and the bits went in, boom, 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 and left these scars on the surface of Jupiter. That was quite a few years ago now. Was it comet, Schumacher-Levy, was that the one? I think it might have been. We know that Jupiter does capture comets. They get, it's such a huge mass, such a huge gravitational field, it pulls things into it. Other comets very likely have gone into the Sun. Some have crashed into other planets, perhaps the Earth. Certainly we get meteorites crashing into the Earth at regular instances. And I showed you my meteorite. There's one of the lectures I've got on here is about my meteorite that someone sent me. Very kind of them, thank you very much. That's actually an iron meteorite, but I'll talk about that in a sec. We know, for example, that Mars is covered with debris in the form of rocks. Earth too has been bombarded with meteorites and still is occasionally. We also know that while most asteroids are rocky bodies, some are not. There are asteroids that are made almost entirely of iron and other metals, even gold. Studies from Earth reveal that heavy metals, and that includes iron, are to be found at the core of a planet and not usually at the mantle or crust. Thus, iron asteroids and meteorites must have come from the inner core of the destroyed planet. They are further evidence of a great catastrophe in our solar system. So that iron meteorite that I found, that was given to me, that must have come from the core of this planet that blew up. I think that is amazing, because otherwise you wouldn't have it. You wouldn't. The other meteorites are rocky, and some of them actually look like they have been subject to stratification. And some of the asteroids and comets also look like they're bits of mountain with stratified layers, as though they've been laid down at different times. They're not dirty ice balls, as we were taught. And I think the scientists have shut up about that now. But they were telling us, comets are just these balls of ice, and as they get close to the sun, they melt, and that's nonsense. That's not what causes the tails. They're caused by electricity. But again, that's another lecture for another time. We won't go into that now. At the heart of the Western tradition is the Bible. This is the collection of sacred books that underpins the Jewish and Christian religions. This is also the background literature from which Islam emerged. The Bible itself did not come out of a vacuum, but in origins emerges from the traditions of the much older religion of Egypt. The Bible tells us that there was once a rebellion in heaven against the will of God, the creative power and mind of all that exists. The rebel angels were cast out of heaven and came to earth, at least some of them. This is the cause of most of the strife and conflict we see on our planet. The fallen angels, far from living peacefully with the people on earth, tricked them into joining the rebellion. And this is the true meaning of the Adam and Eve story. Consequently, Earth is a planet of the fallen. So I wanted you to understand that. You probably, you must have come across the Adam and Eve story, and you most likely dismissed it as just a little fantasy story. You've got to fill up how did we come here? Oh, well, we ate an apple. It's not. It's an allegory. It's an allegory for the fall of mankind by being tricked by the fallen angels who are already here. And Adam and Eve eating that apple was then making a contract with Lucifer, that fallen angel. And because they made that contract, they broke their link with God. They were no longer connected to the flow of energy that goes through the universe and feeds the angels. In ancient literature, you read about this. They call it the ambrosia of the gods. The gods can live on, gives them eternal life. We no longer have that. Therefore, we have to live inside a machine body that can manufacture energies for us to work, to run our brains, our minds, to give us a sense of being. And we get our energy from nature. So we're getting it second-hand instead of direct. And again, I'm doing lectures on this subject. I've put some on the college. The people who are in the college have already seen them. I might put some of them up more publicly in due course. But we have to understand that this is not a normal situation that we live in on this planet. We should be connected directly to the mind and energy of God. But we've separated ourselves by this contract we took out, or our progenitors took out. Not necessarily saying it was one man and one woman, but the contract was signed that put us into this situation where we have to live off the fruits of the land instead of being connected to the ambrosia of the gods. That's what it's all about. The tragic story of planet Earth, and indeed the solar system, is not a secret. It is well known throughout the galaxy. You can believe me on that. Consequently, other entities from other star systems have sought to help us. Now, I'm not going down the pathway of UFOs here. Now, I've met people who've seen UFOs, or they tell me they have anyway, and I've no reason to disbelieve them. But I haven't myself. I've seen other things, I've had other experiences, but I haven't seen a UFO yet. Maybe I will one day, who knows. But what I'm talking about is spirit entities who can come to earth. And these are attested throughout the Bible and in other places too. We call them angels. And angels can come out, they can emerge and appear in front of you. And angels can also incarnate here, or beings, let's just call them beings, can incarnate here. And that's what the whole Magi story is all about. You know, I wrote the book Magi, about the soul of Jesus coming here. And I now believe that the star that they were following was his light. And that the soul body of an entity traveling through space and coming to Earth looks like a star. It's a light, and it floats along. And then it can come and enter into a body and incarnate if there is a suitable body there. And this is the whole story of the Nativity, Jesus being this higher entity who came to Earth and incarnated here. And other people have come here as well, and other people are here now, incarnated to prepare the way for what is coming. So the tragic story of planet Earth, and indeed the solar system, is not a secret. It's well known throughout the galaxy. Consequently, other entities from other star systems have sought to help us. In particular, people, or what we would call angels, have come to Earth from the star system we call Orion. Indeed, we humans are descended from the genome of Adam. Adam just means man in Hebrew, which originates from there. So the human genome has actually been developed in Orion. We haven't evolved on this planet. That's not how evolution works. Evolution is something that's very complicated, and it requires a lot of intelligence and brain power, and I suppose there must be some kind of laboratories. I don't know, but I suppose so. But the results, the fruits of it, the seeds, can then be sown on different planets. This planet's been terraformed. The evolution that we see here is not all sui generis. It's not been come out of itself. I got lectures on this, Revolution and Evolution. There's 3 lectures there. I would urge you to go and watch those ones if you want to know more about this. The Father intelligence of the universe, who we call God, devised a plan for the rescue of the human race. Yeah, he's got a plan for us, a plan for our rescue. Intelligent beings from Orion incarnated on Earth and gave birth to a number of civilizations, including the Egyptian. And I'm talking here about the Egyptians of the time of Osiris and Isis and Thoth. The people in Egypt call them gods, but that's not how they would call themselves. The Egyptians used the word Neteru, and the Netters who came here. Really it just means higher entities who came here and incarnated to convey knowledge and wisdom and set out the plan for the rescue of humankind. They established civilization in Egypt and taught the people methods of self-development. And we read of this in ancient Egyptian literature, and I would urge you to read the Hermetica in particular. There's a lot in there on this subject, and about the fall of man and about how the gods, or the higher entities, came here to rescue us and to set about the right ways of doing things, the right civilization, the rule of Ma'at, the rule of law. Because things were terrible at the time, you know, there was horrible barbarity and bad entities and all sorts of things going on the earth, which, you know, a terrible history that this earth has had. And Egypt was the original Holy Land, where the gods, i.e. those who came from Orion, established schools of learning. That was what they were doing. They were establishing schools. These schools raised the vibrational level of the people using religious chants, music, geometrical shape, and the like. Yeah, they taught them basic civilization, architecture, all these kind of things were brought here from Orion and taught to the people. However, the fallen ones were also not idle and worked to destroy what had been brought to earth. And we read about this in the Egyptian literature about the god Set, who's another name for Satan, and he overthrows and murders his brother Osiris, and he takes over control. We've seen this time and again in Earth's history. The bad guys take over and cause mayhem. And this was anticipated by the holy ones, who knew that they could only plant seeds for the future. At that time, that is. They knew that they were there to prepare the ground, really. And they planted seeds that would germinate and would lead to other things later. Knowing that their work would be undone by the fallen ones, the Orion teachers left behind their calling card. They built the Great Pyramids of Giza to be a repository of their knowledge. Anticipating the dark ages that were to come, they built the pyramids in such a robust and gigantic manner that they would survive to a future time of civilization. In other words, if you want something to last, building out of huge blocks of stone, making it massive, so that the vandals who want to come along and destroy everything, they don't want to do the hard work of destroying something that big. So it's got a good chance of survival. They knew that people in the future, that's in the far future, would research the meaning of these pyramids and eventually realize that they represent the belt of Orion. You can see the two there, the pyramids and the belt of Orion, side by side. And there you can see them superimposed, one on top of the other, and it's exact. It's not a make-believe, it's not a cheat, it's not a fake thing. You get the blow up the pictures to the same format, but keeping their proportions as they are, you get exactly a fit. The position of their work is so exact that if you position a photo of the stars of Orion over an overhead shot of the pyramids, it fits exactly. This was their calling card. Its message is, this is where we came from, and we'll be back. They also established schools of initiation in Egypt, Britain, and a few other places. And I'll talk about some of the other places in later lectures, but I'm just skating over this. I know it's shockingly brief, what I'm saying here, and you're probably thinking this guy's really gone off his rocker now. Where does he get this? Well, from a lot of different places, and a lot of research, and a lot of hard work, that's where. These schools preserved knowledge of the connection between our solar system, called Hor in Egypt, and the Orion constellation. Our sun is actually linked to Orion, but that's another story. This sacred knowledge was recorded on the ceilings of later tombs. The Egyptians of later generations understood that this was the Duat region of the sky. In other words, the region of Orion and Sirius was the Duat, the kingdom of heaven, and it's ruled over by the god king Alcir or Osiris. Osiris is his Greek name. He was the leader of those who had once come to Earth with the first rescue mission. Orion is where the Egyptians wished to go after death. And if you read the Orion mystery, which I wrote with Robert Bovell, you'll see this very clearly. It's revealed over and over again. That's where they want to go. They want to be a star in Orion. That's where they want to be. This is their heaven. Now then, because of the corruption of the human race through interbreeding with the fallen angels, it was not possible to rescue the earth immediately. Yeah, things had to be prepared first. A lot had to be done. A new plan was devised to prepare a family who could eventually give birth to a very high soul from Orion. Abraham was chosen as patriarch of this new lineage because he was obedient to the will of God. He was even prepared to sacrifice his own beloved son when instructed to by God. He was prevented from doing so by an angel and given a sheep to sacrifice instead. You read about this in the book of Genesis. From Abraham and Isaac his son, were born the Israelites. The Israelites get their name from Israel, which was the changed name of Jacob, one of the sons of Isaac. So Jacob changed his name to Israel, and he had 12 sons. Israel's son Jacob had a number of encounters with the angelic world. You read about that again in the Bible, in the book of Genesis. He was the most cunning of Isaac's 2 boys and was chosen for his intelligence. Quite clear. He had 12 sons, his favourite being Joseph, one of the youngest. Joseph's brothers were jealous of his father's affection for him and sold him into slavery. You've seen the musical, or at least you've heard of it. Joseph and his Technicolor Dreamcoat. And he's thrown into a pit, and then they get him out and they sell him to Arab slave traders. They're so angry, with him. And then they take his multicoloured robe, rub it in sheep's blood, take it to his father and say, oh, he's caught by a wolf, he's dead. Oh, liars. Anyway, Joseph was taken to Egypt, where he earned a reputation for honesty and for being able to interpret dreams. And he saved Egypt from a great famine, and the Pharaoh promoted him to vizier. He also married the daughter of the high priest. Right, so Joseph is now right up there. He's the number 2 in Egypt. And he saves the family. From his exalted position, he was able to save his father and brothers and settle them too in Egypt. They didn't know who he was, at least not at first, but he provided them with grain, and eventually he revealed himself, and he forgave the brothers. He said it was all part of the plan, that this was meant to happen in order to save them. And so anyway, they all settled down happily in Egypt. Joseph was a very wise man who understood the knowledge of the Egyptians. That's important. He learnt from the schools of the Egyptians. He's married to the high priest's daughter. Of course he's going to learn. He's number 2 to the Pharaoh. He's a very bright guy. And he was actually Zoser, or Joser, who the Egyptians call Imhotep, which means the one who comes in peace. And he's greatly loved by the Egyptians and inherited his father's chief blessing. Now, I've done other lectures on this. I'm going to do a lot more in due course. But that's who Joseph was. He's Imhotep. And Imhotep, or Joser, built the step pyramid at Saqqara. But it's not as old as the Great Pyramids. They got it the wrong way round. However, the plan was that the Israelites would leave Egypt and establish a new Holy Land in Canaan. Their sojourn in Egypt was mainly so that they could inherit the wisdom and knowledge of the Egyptians. That's why they went there. 10 plagues had to befall the Egyptians before Moses was able to lead them to Mount Sinai, which is in Arabia, not the so-called Sinai Peninsula. That's another thing which has been discovered in recent years, actually, that the real Mount Sinai is in northern Arabia, but that's another lecture as well. And he established a new religion and covenant with God. So Moses established a new covenant with God with the 10 Commandments. They're given 10 Commandments to live by. As long as they would adhere to these, they would prosper. And Moses had a brother called Aaron. And you may have not realized that. He had a brother called Aaron. Aaron used to do the talking. Moses wasn't too good with using words. He wasn't a gifted orator. So he got his brother to do the talking, his brother Aaron. And he's consecrated as the first high priest of Israel. I think that happens in the next book. I'm not sure. Aaron is Hebrew for Orion. Now just get that. He's called Orion in Hebrew, Aaron. And he was the first initiate of the Aaron-Orion brotherhood. And powers were conferred upon him. He had a staff you could cast on the ground and it turned into a serpent. It's one of the things that he did for the Pharaoh. He cast his stick on the ground, but the Pharaoh's magicians, who were black magicians. They cast their staffs down. They became snakes too. But Aaron's snake gobbled them up. Gobbled up the other snakes. And that staff is said to be preserved in the Ark of the Covenant, which still exists as well. And the people who claim they know where it is, but that's another story as well. So Aaron is the first high priest of Israel, and from him are descended the other high priests. Thereafter, the high priests of Israel and Judah had to be descended from the family of Aaron. Only they were able to tend the Ark of the Covenant without being instantly killed by the cherubim who guarded it. So this Orion lineage of Aaron, they are the high priests, and they're the only ones. And when they built the temple, the high priest was the only person who could go into the inner sanctum to tend to the ark and sprinkle some blood on it once a year. And if anyone else would go in there, they'd be killed instantly. The cherubim are very high, powerful angels, and they put there to guard the ark, as long as it was in there. A school of Orion prophets was later established in Israel. Their headquarters was Mount Carmel, next to the city we now call Haifa, and at the head of the Jezreel Valley, Valley of the Travelers, that leads to Mount Megiddo or Armageddon. So Mount Megiddo is at one end of the Jezreel Valley, and Mount Carmel is at the other end by the sea. And that features a lot, as you probably know, in the book of Revelation and in the book of Ezekiel. A great battle going to be fought there in Armageddon. The most famous of these prophets was Elijah, who defied King Ahab and his wicked wife Jezebel. He prophesied that she would die and be unburied, and her body would be eaten by dogs. This came to pass when she was thrown from a window. She was left in the streets and eaten by dogs. All that they left behind, apparently, were the soles of her feet. I think maybe her hands as well. They ate all the rest. That was the end of Jezebel, very, very wicked woman. He is said to have been, this is Elijah, said to have been carried off to heaven in a flaming chariot. And this indicates that he was taken to Orion. Now this maybe was some kind of flying saucer, I don't know. But Chariots of the Gods goes on about that, doesn't it? If you've ever read Eric von Däniken's book. I've met Eric, actually. He's quite a personable guy. But the Chariots of the Gods, talking about the angels who came to Earth and these chariots and how there must have been ETs living here on Earth to build all the big monuments that we see around us. I kind of agree with that, except I think a lot of it was done by Earth people under the guidance of incarnated high entities living as fellow Earth people, hence the Osiris people, etc. But I might be wrong. There could have well have been ETs coming here in flying saucers as well. Anyway, so he is said to have been carried off to heaven in a flaming chariot, and this indicates that he was taken to Orion. That's where they would go. And he would later reincarnate as John the Baptist, the cousin of Jesus. Right, so he's an Orion initiate. There was a larger plan to free the souls trapped on Earth, but it would involve the sacrifice of God's Son in order to buy them back from Satan and the fallen angels. The problem was that the human race had made a blood covenant with Satan, from which they could not free themselves. Only one not bound by the covenant could do that. So I want you to understand, if you've made a blood covenant that you're going to accept Satan as your Lord and Master, you cannot then free yourself because you have nothing to buy yourself back with. You're his bondsman, as it's called. Only someone who has something which is higher can buy you back from Satan. And that's why Jesus had to come here, to be sacrificed on the cross. I know it seems weird, but this is God plays by the rules. I mean, you probably could bend them if you wanted to, but he plays by the rules. This is why Jesus had to come to earth and offer himself as the perfect sacrifice. This is why Jesus had to undergo the agony of dying on the cross. He offered his own blood and life in order to buy back the human race from the covenant signed by their ancestors with Satan, symbolized by eating the forbidden fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So I want you to understand this. Get away from the picture of Adam and Eve in the garden, no clothes on, picking apples. Oh, I've been a naughty boy, I shouldn't have eaten that. That is just an allegory. The truth is that they entered into a covenant of knowledge with the fallen angels. The angels said, look, come with us, we know the stuff. We've got it worked out. We know how to build a good civilization. We can make life good for you. And then you'll be just as clever as those smart guys up there in Orion. Yeah, you'll be just as smart as they are. And they're going to fear that. And by doing that, they cut themselves off from the flow of grace that comes through the universe and feeds higher beings, the ambrosia of the gods. They were no longer able to partake of that. That's why they had to die. Yeah, that's why death came into the world. And the only way to avoid that was to have the possibility of incarnating into bodies. So as one body dies, so the soul can come out, it's got enough fuel in it to last for a short time in the in-between world, what they call the Bardo world in Tibetan Buddhism. Yeah, I do know a bit about Buddhism. But then it must come back into another body quickly. So anyway, he offered his own blood and life in order to buy back the human race from the covenant signed by their ancestors with Satan, symbolized by eating the forbidden fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Jesus established a new covenant with mankind. All those who would be true and faithful to the covenant, Jew or Gentile, that's Jesus' covenant, would have the opportunity of returning with him to heaven. So he's buying you back. As long as you want to be part of his gang, then you're covered by his blood sacrifice. The blood of Jesus has the power over the devil. You have to realize that. And that is why the chalice, the Holy Grail, symbolizes so much. It symbolized the power over the devil. But if you don't partake of it, if you're not covered by that covenant, if you've turned your back on the church, on Jesus, and I'm not saying you have to go to church and, on Sundays go to the Catholic Church. I'm not saying that. You need to have a covenant with Jesus. You need to accept him as your Lord and Master. And I know that is another stumbling block for a lot of people. They think, well, this guy didn't even exist. Who is he? What are they talking about? It's nonsense. Study the prophecies, and you will understand and know, and do it before he comes back. He's due back very soon, I believe. Do it before, so that you can be saved and not cast down with the fallen angels. And this would not happen immediately, but at the end of the age. That's the return to heaven. That time is now. Yes, I believe it's coming very soon. So the symbol of the covenant of Jesus is the Holy Grail. By tradition, this was the cup used by him, that's Jesus, at the Last Supper, immediately prior to his arrest, torture, and crucifixion. It is also said to have been used by Joseph of Arimathea to catch drops of blood flowing from the wounds of Jesus. This gave it magical properties of healing. This is what they say. The legend that grew up around it is that it was brought by Joseph to Britain along with 12 disciples. He was the uncle of Jesus and a rich trader in tin and other metals. He had contacts in Britain and established a school or choir in Wales. But this is another story. So for those of you who don't know, Britain in the ancient world was well known, and it was famous for being a supplier of metals, especially tin, which they had in Cornwall and Devon. But it also supplied lead. It supplied gold in some quantities. There was a lot of copper in North Wales. There was iron. I mean, this was a very, very rich island. and the Britons were by no means the savages that you maybe think. They had a very well-developed Iron Age religion at the time, culture at the time the Romans arrived. And Joseph is said to have come after the time of Jesus, probably around about 34, 35 AD, maybe 36. So not that long after the crucifixion. And the Romans arrived to conquer Britain in 43 AD. So there's a gap, a period. And for 9 years they fought, trying to overcome Caractacus in Wales. But this is a whole other story. Anyway, by that time, the Christian religion was established, at least in Wales and the southwest, even before the Roman conquest. And it carried on here, and in secret, for many centuries. And there were things preserved here in Britain that were lost elsewhere, right up into the Middle Ages. And the Grail legends contain a lot of this, but again, it's coded in symbolic form. You have to dig deep to find these mysteries. So, knowledge of Orion was also preserved in Wales, for in the Mabinogion tales, the king of the dead is called Ariorn, which is the Welsh equivalent of Aaron or Orion. And he's described as the king of the dead, lives in the islands of the dead. That's actually the start of Orion. And he has hunting dogs. Following Orion is Canis Major, the great dog, and Canis Minor, the small dog. Those are his hunting dogs. Orion in Northern Europe is seen as being a hunter. So these things were preserved here in Britain. And I'm going to go into that again in future lectures, but we can't cover everything. So what I've tried to give you here is an overall wham in your face picture of what the Western way is all about. It's about the rescue mission that has been mounted from Orion to this planet in this damaged solar system in which we live, to rescue the human race and take us from here, where we will go back to Orion and maybe on to there's many mansions in the house of my father, Jesus said. Star systems by the galore. And we've got great fun and adventures ahead of us. So I wanted to give you this overview. Make of it what you like. Think that I'm completely nuts if you like, but it is interesting, isn't it? Start putting the pieces together yourself. Watch some of my other lectures. Watch what I'm going to do in future. Join the college if you can. Only cost you £5 a month, not a lot. But this is not an advertising. I'm not doing that. I'm trying to give you the overview, the jigsaw puzzle for what this is all about. So thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to talking to you again. Thank you.